What are the stages of startup from inception to maturity to exit, and what happened at each one of them? That's what we're going to find out today. My name is Fauzal and this is Startup Sprint. So there are 5 stages in a startup lifecycle. The first one is problem solution fit. The second one is MVP or minimum viable product. The third one is product market fit. The fourth one is scale, and the fifth one is maturity and liquidity event. Number 1, finding problem solution fit. This is the very beginning of your startup journey. You may have an idea, or you have some problem, or you may see a particular gap in the industry that no one else is addressing. The purpose of the first stage is to find out if the problem is real and the solution is feasible. How can we find problem solution fit even before we build anything? The first step is to create a hypothesis. A hypothesis is an assumption that can clearly be proven wrong. For example, I believe that restaurant owners will use our food delivery platform because they will increase their takeaway revenue by 40%, because they will have additional exposure to a wider customer base coming from our mobile apps users. Number 2, once you have a hypothesis, find the people that fit into your segment and talk to them. Ask questions to understand more about their problem and what are they doing now to solve it. You can also create a very simple landing page and also create a crowdfunding campaign just to test out the demand of it. Use your discoveries and insights to iterate and improve on your idea until you find the right problem solution fit. By the end of this, you'll have 2 things. The first one is you can clearly articulate the problem that your customer are facing. And number 2, you will have a number of people that already buy into your solution. On the financial side, startup at this stage normally will not receive any funding yet and will bootstrap their way until they will have their first MVP. The second stage of startup lifecycle is to build your first MVP or minimum viable product. There are 2 goals at this stage. The first one is to build your first MVP, and also the second one is to get your initial traction. So what is an MVP? MVP stands for minimum viable product. It means that it's a product that have a set of the most minimum feature with the goal to test it out to your first early adopters of users. Traction is the number of users that used, subscribe, or paid for your product. The purpose of the next step is to test out your product hypothesis with the smallest possible investment of capital and time. This way, you are proving demand, learning about customer behavior, all the while doing it with the minimal risk. So how do you build MVP and traction? You can refer to Lean Startup Framework, which have all the best practices to build your MVP. Building an MVP could take you 1 day to 6 months. So it's gonna be your call, so decide wisely. You can start gaining traction by acting on channel discovery. Channel to get your first customers could be via email marketing, WhatsApp group, and many more. On the financial side, startup at this stage normally can raise funds through angel investors or early stage VC. In the tech industry, this stage of investment is normally called pre-seed or seed stage investment. Number 3, now that you had your first minimum viable product and get your initial traction, now is where you will get to your product market fit. So, what is product market fit? It is when your product managed to hit that sweet spot of customer value proposition and managed to address a specific customer segment that used your product. So, how do you know if you've achieved product market fit? There are 2 ways. The first one is to look into your internal data, and the second one is to do surveys. So number 1, look at your internal data. How does your retention and churn rate numbers looks like? The ideal number of churn rate and retention varies depending on your business model and your industry. It'd be awesome if you can share your industry's churn rate and retention rate down below in the comment. And number 2, you can also do customer surveys. There are 2 things that you can do in customer surveys. The first one is NPS or Net Promoter Score, and number 2 is Sean Ellis test for product market fit. For Net Promoter Score, from the range of 1 to 10, if your startup rates at about 9 to 10, that means you guys are already achieving product market fit. And it also means that your customer actually talking about you and referring you to their friends. You can also try out Sean Ellis product market fit test. If you can get 40% of your existing customer base to feel sad if your product is taken away from the market, that means it's a good indicator for a product market fit. Financially, startups at this stage are in the seed stage and are now ready to raise Series A. Now that you've reached product market fit, let's talk about stage 4 of the startup lifecycle, which is scale. The goal of the scaling stage is to double down on what works and experiment on additional value proposition while exploring new market segments. So this is the time where the startup are expected to grow exponentially in X amount of time to dominate the industry that they're in. By now, you should already know which communication and sales channel that works for your product. It can be offline, like direct sales, or community events. Or it can also be online, like SEO, AdWords, social media advertising, and many more. In scaling stage, this is where you maximize all of the channels that can boost your product metrics, such as downloads, views, or transactions. Additionally, looking for future growth, there are 3 things that you can do to further scale your startup. The first one is to expand geographically. The second one is to create a new product value proposition. And the third one is to explore a new market segment. For the first one, to expand geographically, a good example would be Gojek. They started off in Jakarta and now growing in multiple cities in Indonesia. On top of that, they're also expanding to Southeast Asia. The second way, which is to create a new product value proposition. For example, if your current startup is helping people to borrow money, the additional value proposition could be helping people to manage their money and do investment for them. The third one is exploring a new market segment. For example, if your current product is helpful for rice farmers, maybe your existing product can also be useful for durian farmers. To help you achieve these objectives, normally startup at this stage will do massive hiring of specialists to help support their scaling up growth. Financially, startup at this stage is already on their Series A and onwards, which is Series B, C, and so on, as they have proven historical growth that will fuel their future expansion. The fifth and last stage of startup lifecycle is maturity and liquidity event. In this stage, your objective is to continue growing and innovating by predicting and addressing market changes. However, your growth rate may slow down as the company matures. But at the world's top tech companies, it never stops because it is baked into their culture. For example, LinkedIn, which is almost 20 years old, and they continue to push for growth experiments. Same goes for Facebook. Facebook has over 1 billion users. They're still buying apps and rolling out tests. Top companies like Facebook keep growing by investing in their growth team, begin to look towards strategic mergers and acquisitions, internationalization, localization to adapt product experience to cultural nuances of the new region. For example, LinkedIn bought lynda.com as a way to expand the value to their existing customers as well as broaden their target market. Financially, these are the stage where startups raise late-stage funding or have their liquidity event such as IPO or acquisition by a bigger company. There you go. So those are the 5 components in a startup lifecycle. Each have their own objectives, activities, and the financial stage. Don't forget to like and subscribe this channel. Also, I'm always happy to discuss and answer your questions. So don't forget to leave your comment down below. Once again, this is Startup Sprint. I'm Fauzal, signing out.